to infinity and beyond!
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No. I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Owens here with Johnny Sobchak for a huge week at Inside the Film Room. You know, we're going back to back today. We're recording 2 episodes because this past weekend was just too big to fit into one. We were at Film Fest 919 on the ground in Chapel Hill, on the ground, butts in seats, watching movies all weekend long. And then we hurried back straight from there into House of the Dragon for the season 1 finale. So there's a ton of stuff that we are going to be talking about, which is why this is going to be a special double episode coming at you with 919 recap part 1 and House of the Dragon talk. And then later this week, we'll be hitting you with part 2, talking about the rest of the movies that we saw. Johnny, the boys were back in town. We were together this weekend for a brief overlap between movies. It's great to see you as always. How was the weekend overall for you?
Yeah, thank you. It was great to see you too, man. Always a pleasure to catch up in person, catch some good old cinema. I think overall it was another excellent Film Fest 919, another fun, enjoyable, satisfying weekend for me. I was definitely not as taking a deep of a dive as some others, including yourself, but I did a decent job, I think, curating what I wanted to see and what I was taking some responsibility for. So I had a really good time getting to see people, getting to catch up, but also the films themselves. I didn't have a single, really, I wouldn't say like a disappointment or like something that I thought wasn't very good. You know what I mean? So and it wasn't, it was a bit of course, different like tiers to how good I thought certain things were, but overall, really couldn't complain at all, and really had a good time.
Yeah, it's fun. One of the things that I kind of forget about going into it, we didn't really talk about it, but that it's like a who's who of North Carolina film Twitter when you're at Silver Spot, because, like these people, whether you and I are both NCFCA members of the North Carolina Film Critics Association, and we know other people or at least follow them, and you actually kind of get to meet them in person here. A lot of familiar faces and matching up. Oh wait, you're at whatever their handle is, and getting to know them, and also friends that we have in real life that we usually see at screenings or at this festival. So that was a very cool part of the festival. But like you said, great lineup, super awesome time throughout the weekend. They always do a fantastic job of hosting it. And I only was at Silver Spot this weekend. Did you go to the second location, to Lumina, for anything, or were you just Silver Spot?
I did, actually. 2 of the 3 movies I saw were at Lumina. My first time being over there, I wasn't really familiar with it. I saw it on the schedule and was a little curious as to what that was all about. But nice theater, nice little small.
I went there in college I would say frequently, because it's pretty
Really?
close by to campus, but had not been in a long time.
Yeah, so I liked it. I saw the Banshees of Inisherin there, and also Women Talking, my final film, was also there.
Well, we will get down into some of those here in a bit, but like I said, we're talking part 1 of Film Fest 919, going to be talking about 4 different movies today, and then the remainder of our 6 that we covered combined that will be coming at you later this week. And we're also talking about House of the Dragon season finale. And instead of, our typical, what are you watching? What did you see on TV? The answer for TV is House of the Dragon. The answer for movies is everything that we saw at the film festival. So instead of just, slow playing it, we're going to dive right into business, get down to business here with House of the Dragon, episode 10 reactions, season finale. Man, it's I'm very sad because of things that happened in the episode, but more so because of the fact that we have to wait for who knows how long for season 2 of this, because this was such a treat to be back in Westeros every Sunday night and see something so great. But here we are in the off season once again. Let me lay the foundation here and we can get down to it. Episode 10, The Black Queen. While mourning a tragic loss, Rhaenyra tries to hold the realm together and Daemon prepares for war. Pretty good summary there, pretty apt. Johnny, what are the thoughts? I'm gonna go ahead and put the spoiler warning out there because this is the season finale. We want to break it all down, the whole season, this episode, what's to come, all of that good stuff. So spoilers beware.
Yeah. I'm still trying to process. It's been less than 24 hours and like a lot of discussion online, memes galore, of course. But yeah, I mean, this was a heavy episode. I think just as heavy as some of the more emotional episodes we've seen throughout the season, of course, which there's no shortage, I feel like. But this one really put Rhaenyra through the ringer. It's kind of like, if fans of like comic books or DC Comics, Batman, you might know this concept like one bad day, which is kind of like it's been in the past. It's been references like the origin of the Joker. Like he was a normal, like good guy, and then he had one bad day and turned into this like killer. And in this case, Rhaenyra, it's not exactly in one day, but in a very, relatively short period of time, she learns that her father has died, potentially been assassinated. They suspect, Daemon at least says that he thinks that he may have been killed by Alicent or Otto. She learns that Aegon is usurped her throne, has taken her birthright out from under her. Alicent is obviously part of that, and so she has feelings about that, no doubt. Her child, that she has in the womb, comes prematurely and dies, which was interesting. I wasn't able to really make it out. I think they were like purposely leaving it ambiguous, but in the books and even in the first Game of Thrones series, they allude to the fact that sometimes Targaryens have like mutated or like deformed children that have like dragon-like features. This one seemed like we didn't really get a clear look at its face. It looked like it was suffocated, perhaps like it had its umbilical cord around its neck or something like that.
And they also said that it was very early.
It was very early. Yeah. They're like, this shouldn't be happening. And of course it's not common, but it's pretty well known that if women go through like intense like distress, they can have premature like births. And so that certainly adds up there. But yeah, so she has her child, which dies. It's pretty much, born dead. And then she, at the end of the episode, has her son, Lucerys, killed, murdered by Aemon. There, I guess you could say manslaughtered, perhaps, but it was not a good time for Rhaenyra this episode. Oh, and don't forget that her lover, her partner, her uncle, her right hand man, Daemon, chokes her in the episode as well. Like really gets pissed off and takes it out on Rhaenyra. And it's the first time I think at least that we are aware of and that we see in the show that he does like get physically violent with her, and it's obviously upsetting. And she even seems like pretty shocked by it. And so she's just like getting it from all sides, really. And it's horrible. And then it, of course, culminates with this fantastic, perfect last scene and last shot, really, because it's a one take where Daemon comes in and delivers the news that Lucerys has been killed. And we don't see her face or her reaction, really. We see her physical reaction from behind. And then she turns around and we have this close up of Emma Darcy. And they give the like close up performance shot of the year, I would say, reminiscent of Daenerys, Emilia Clarke as Daenerys, like season 8, where she is just, you can tell that it's not like she's gone off the rails or anything, but she's gone past the point of trying to find peace or like make the safest decision. And that's what we'll imagine we'll find at the start of season 2, whenever we get that. But I would say that was really the focal point of the episode. It's called The Black Queen. And I think black in this instance, you could almost say has multiple meanings, because black, I mean, obviously like death and that sort of thing. And death is all around Rhaenyra in this episode.
That it is. Oh, what a just traumatic 24, 48 72. I don't know how many days this goes over, but just a traumatic couple days for her, because that everything that you just described is so awful. But obviously the biggest, most shocking twist is not twist, I guess, but the ending, the
Right.
scene between Lucerys and Aemond. You know, we have this plan that, okay, we're gonna go, we need to rally our bannermen, we need to get our allies. And Jacaerys, the older brother, is the one who says ravens will mean nothing here, like let us go on Dragonback, not only because it's faster, but because it'll allow us to show our force and demonstrate our power and win them over. And so that's what the queen allows them to do. And we get this tender goodbye between Luke and his mother, you know, her baby boy. And then it's so sad because it's like the youngest child. We have this almost like, it's like a gangly teenage dragon, basically, that doesn't really, it doesn't compare whatsoever to Vagar or even like Drogon. Or we remember when Dany was raising her dragons and they were in that awkward stage. Like,
Yeah.
he's like kind of big on his back. Luke looks big on his back, basically. It's not like he's being dwarfed by the dragon.
Yeah.
And then obviously there's like the standoff once they get to Storm's End. Bad plan in the first place, I think, because when you pull up and you see Vagar parked out front, you got to turn around, head home. But you know that can only mean trouble. But Luke was sent there, as his mother said, as he says, as a messenger, not a warrior. He's not playing any of the games that Aemond wants, as he's goading him to stab out his own eye as a debt that he owes. But the plan in general is thrown off because Aemond was there. Aemond has promised to marry one of Boris Baratheon's daughters. Meanwhile, Boris is offended that Rhaenyra would just go off of an old promise versus offering something. But Boris helps him out. He's like, no, do not do this under my roof. Do not do this in my halls. There will be no fighting. And lets him get escorted out. But then we have just the devastating chase and death, the shocking death of Luke and Arax. I believe that's the name of the dragon. Yeah. But I want to talk about this in general because I've seen a lot of really cool stuff talking about the dragons and what happened, the intentions and all that. Yeah. Because in the book, it's far more intentional. It is like, this is a murder that Aemond commits. It was fully on purpose. He finds the body as well, carves out the eyes, and takes them as a gift, sending a message that he's paid his debt after losing his own eye to Luke back in the day. Yeah. And the body washes up on shore like that. But obviously super intentional. No questionable judgment there. But one thing to keep in mind is that the book itself, like, this is something that I didn't really know, but as I was reading more about it, because I have not read the book, but the book itself is told through the perspective of three different maesters. Like, George R.R. Martin is writing it as three different maesters. And as we know, the maesters are loyal to whoever they support. And so it's like this kind of questionable history, saying that, like, okay, this is like it's very much like history is written by the victors kind of thing of like, okay, we're portraying this in a positive light because this was our side. And so like, the point has been raised that like the book itself is not necessarily accurate because there's like different tellings of events and like it's all like biased. So the way that they're looking at this is that like, okay, that was what the way that this diverts and has Aemond not necessarily have it be intentional, more of like an accident. They're saying that like, oh, the maesters wrote it as this way because Aemond went on to be this war criminal, I guess is a better term. But this is like the start of his story versus like, oh, who knows what actually happened, what was actually going through his mind, which is the interpretation that the show takes. And it gives us this interesting conflict of like, okay, we thought Aemond was very bad, but now we see that he knows that he messed up. There's immediate like regret, fear. I don't know if it's regret, but just like shock, fear. I don't even know. He's scared of what he has done. When he realizes it, because he was trying to control Vhagar and Vhagar did not listen. As Viserys said, it's all an illusion that we control the dragons. So I know I just talked for a lot about a lot of different things, but thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I thought honestly that may have been the most brilliant or like best thing about the episode, as far as not just the episode itself, which I still think it might have been, but also thinking about differences between the book and the show, just that they've done throughout the season. I think it's awesome to show that the dragons are in fact, they can be quote unquote controlled to some degree, because they have this bond and love and relationship with their riders. But at the end of the day, it's like any animal, even domestic animals like dogs and cats and all that kind of thing, like they are still, their own being. And you can have a dog on a leash and it can be normal and it seems like it's totally fine, you have full control over it, and something snaps or something happens, and they are going to do what an animal does, and they'll do whatever that reaction is. It could be violent, it could be negative. And dragons, I mean, they're the most powerful beings in the world, and to act like they are pets, or that they are fully under the yoke of the Targaryens, is almost like foolish. And I really liked how it was said by Viserys in episode 1, saying that the dragons were a power we shouldn't have trifled with, that the idea that we can control them is like a joke. And that has been kind of, we've seen a little bit of like hints that dragons have a mind of their own, and that they are truly their own beings throughout the show. And the fact that you have these two, you have Vhagar, the oldest, like the most ornery probably of all the dragons, the most grumpy, and then you also have Arax, who is a baby dragon, who's not experienced like Vhagar is, and is probably scared and like gets anxious easily and those sorts of things, just like Jace, or just like Luke rather, and Lucerys. So you have these like parallels. And of course, Aemond, he thinks he's the best in the world. He thinks he's so cool. He's so badass. No one can touch him. He's never made a mistake. He just does everything so perfectly. And he is under that impression that he quickly finds out that, oh shit, like Vhagar, I don't have this under control. Like this is getting out of hand, like more than I wanted to or expected it to. And you can see, I loved the two best shots of the show to me. Well, there's some amazing shots and beautiful visuals, but two of the best, most telling shots I thought were at the very end, where the last shot we have of Aemond, where he looks like petrified, like he looks scared and like maybe sad to some degree and confused, and just can't believe like what he did, or like what Vhagar did and what happened. And he has to now live with that and go tell his mother and go, realize that this is going to kick off like a potentially huge conflict, and he's going to be kind of responsible for it and held to that that level of like a kinslayer and that sort of thing, because they are related. And he killed a dragon, and he killed his relative, and so it's just like this huge monumental event that happens. And I wouldn't even say it's like by accident, because it's Aemond's fault that happened. Like it's
right. He was like goading him on, like he put himself in that situation. Like, sure, it wasn't his intention, and Vhagar acted on its own, but like Aemond was the one who was chasing him and basically started provoking that situation where it never had to happen in the first place.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like I saw someone use this analogy or say this analogy earlier in a video I was watching, but it's like, if you dangle someone by their heels over a cliff, and you're bullying them and like trying to like make it almost like a prank or a joke, and then you slip your hands and they fall into their death. Well, it's not, you're not off scot-free. It's not like you weren't responsible to some level, otherwise that person would still be alive, and now instead you have a horrible tragedy. Aemond didn't kill, but I think that's just so cool how it does give a little bit more depth to Aemond, I think, who people have been saying is like almost like an anime villain, which I think is hilarious.
Right.
Just the way he acts, but also his design, of course, with the eye patch. Now he has a sapphire in his eye socket, which is also pretty badass and very cool looking. So it's easy to forget that he is just a young man, like he's like 20 or like 19 or
This
something.
was it. Like all we know from him is like he claimed this big ass dragon. He's always been like he's like on site, ready to fight all the time. And like we think of him as this like savage, but at the same time, this was his first time. He's never killed anyone. He's never fought in a war. Like he's never done any of these things that Damon has. But instead, he's like you said, he's still a child pretty much, and he's finally this is his first time on Dragonback. This was the first dance of the dragons between these two,
Yeah.
and he's like, oh shit, like this is what it's about to be, and I'm the one who started this.
Yeah. Well, that's what I also, it kind of hit me later on today when I've been just thinking about it so much is, as crazy and as wild as this uh sequence was, and it really was, I think honestly, this show more than anything, if you want to talk about living up to the hype, they've nailed the dragons this season in these 10 episodes. I think they've done an exceptional job with the CG for the most part, like bringing them to life, like visually, but also their presence in the show and how scary and how intimidating and powerful they are and can be. But this is the first time, really. I mean, we saw some of the stuff in Game of Thrones with the Night King once he got his dragon, like the Ice Dragon versus Daenerys and Jon. We did get some of that like dragon to dragon fighting. But this is the first time we have two like natural dragons and two like human riders going at it that we see on screen. And it doesn't really start as a fight, like it's more of a pursuit and a chase, but it does end up in death and kind of destruction. And it's hard to believe that this is what is, it's not going to, let's say it's not the norm, but there's a lot more where this came from, presumably. And it was just like, it made me feel sick. Like it was just sick, like a gut punch.
No, I legitimately felt it in my stomach when this like it was kind of I'm not necessarily surprised by it because like we knew, first of all, we know from Game of Thrones, like this is something savage is always possible. We knew that there had to be some sort of like finale big event here in episode 10, and like it's never good news when you show up and the biggest dragon in the world is there. So in some form or fashion, we knew it was not looking good for Luke. So still, when they came above the clouds, and then we get that out of nowhere chomp, like I felt like sick to my stomach, legitimately. And like I like Luke was a good character. I like seeing him. I like seeing him and Rhaena, I believe, was his bride, and like his relationship with Rhaenyra. Like it wasn't, but it's not like he was like a main character. I feel like it's more of like the sadness of what it represents and what it means for Rhaenyra, because that's who we're obviously like closely bonded to as the who's presented as the protagonist here. But this is so weird because I like thought about this scene, this death all day long, and I'm like, it feels like real to me, and I'm like, this is so silly because it's just like this minor character in the show, but still, I think that means that that shows exactly how powerful that this show is and how it'll stick with us.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to say, I know we kind of strayed away from it a little bit, but I want to get back to the dragon and the like what actually happened. One of the cool things that I was reading about, and like you obviously see it in the show, is like the bonding. We've talked about that a little bit between the dragons, the connection between the dragon and the rider. It just earlier in the episode, in the miscarriage scene, there's the intercut between Rhaenyra and then Syrax yelling, screaming, roaring, I guess, as she's like feeling Rhaenyra's pain while she's miscarrying. We see Daemon earlier in the episode when he's presenting the Kingsguard with the two options, those two people. Basically telling them like bend the knee or die, and doesn't say anything, no commands. And his dragon comes, Caraxes comes, perfect timing, and is right there over his shoulder. And that also happens in the episode 2 when Otto and Daemon have the standoff on the bridge. Like right when Daemon draws his sword is when Caraxes comes flying in. So proven examples of like just that unspoken bond, feeling the emotions, feeling the pain of the riders. And one of the coolest things that I read about this episode is that like it wasn't that the dragons lost control per se. That's obviously part of it, but it was like the lack of ability for Luke and for Aemond to manage their emotions. Because as we get out there, when Luke's first leaving, like obviously Arax is like very fidgety. He's very upset at the presence of Vagar, and he's telling him like, listen to me, calm down, pay attention, focus. And so the dragon is able to do that, but it's Luke who can't, because he's looking over his shoulder, he's freaking out. Same way that Aemond is telling, but before any of this even happens, when they're on the dragon still, Aemond is telling him like, no, obey me, Vagar, obey me, like before he even like chomps down on him. But they can feel the fear, the hatred between the two, and it's almost like the dragon took that into its own hands, because Arax obviously attacks first, and that's when Vagar is like, okay, enough of this, like I'm doing this myself.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And there's this is another thing that I like garnered more from listening and watching stuff about more about the books. And you do get some of this in the show, like, or at least it's alluded to. The dragons and the riders seem to have almost like a telepathic like level of connection.
It's like Avatar.
It is kind of like Avatar, and they have and like maybe even not necessarily like like you could call it telepathy almost, but just like they share their feelings, or like there's like a mutual like unspoken kind of way that they align their minds and their emotions and everything. And I think that's very much reflected in Arax and Lucerys, like in that moment. He's telling the dragon to calm down, but they're both like they're terrified, like both of them, like they're very anxious and inexperienced, and so there's nervousness, there's fear, like uncertainty and all those things. And I think that fed into why Arax reacted the way he did, obviously, and threw fire, breathed fire at Vagar without being ordered to. And of course, Lucerys says something to the effect of like, no, like you like must obey me. And that's it turns out, dragons don't have to obey you if they really don't want to. And I think it was just a great reminder that is the case, and makes me wonder, like, I wonder if we are going to see more of that throughout the series potentially. Because like I said, they have done such a great job building up the dragons as almost their own characters in this first season. There's more dragons to come, no doubt. We saw Vermithor at the end of towards the end of this episode, where Daemon goes to not necessarily, I don't think, claim Vermithor, but
just saying, hey, checking in.
Yeah, like, hey, there might be a little thing happening soon. I'd just like to see if we're still cool. And so I'll be curious to see how that develops. There's just definitely a lot more dragons on the horizon. I'm really excited. No doubt the budget's going to go up. There's going to be more VFX, of course, more dragon designs, more colors, more fights and chase sequences and that sort of thing. So it's going to be off the wall. This is just, like I said, just a taste, and it makes me wonder, like, how sick to my stomach am I going to feel like on a regular basis, like with these shows, with these battles? Because the dragons, one thing that I think stuck out to me in Game of Thrones, the original series, was like when something bad happened to the dragons, like one of them was killed or hurt or in trouble or something, like I always felt sick. Like you always feel bad because it is an animal.
It's so like a pet.
It's like a pet. Yeah, like when you see a dog or a cat or something like that in a movie, or a horse or something, and it's in trouble or it could be in danger or killed, like you definitely react a certain way. And I feel that very much like with the dragons as well, even though they're more supposed to be like more monstrous and that sort of thing. It's still, they're very like majestic creatures in a lot of ways, and like it is sad when they are injured or killed. So I think that's going to be tough to deal with, and hopefully the show and the writers do a good job balancing that and like honoring that in a way, because it could be very easy to, like, I feel, not give that the weight it deserves, and also almost like desensitize us or like make it like just like a common thing. And I hope that they do a good job of kind of building that out and hitting that mark kind of every time. And there's definitely going to be a lot of instances, I have no doubt, because by the time we get to Game of Thrones, there aren't any dragons.
I was literally just about to say that. I think they said, Damon said it would be 12-4 if they got all of theirs like all of the eggs, all of the young dragons, you know, once they got them trained up, they got Vormithir, or is that how you say it? I don't remember.
Vermithor,
Um,
yeah.
Vermithor. That it would be 12 for Team Black and 4 for Team Green. So that's at least 16 dragons that we'll have to bite the bullet before we get to Daenerys' 3 dragons. So I feel like we might be sick quite a bit in the coming
Yeah.
seasons.
Yeah. And that's not even, you know, we're talking about the dragons and now
Not even the people.
the riders, you know. There's lots of characters that they've grown literally throughout this season, and we're gonna get more time with them. And of course the OGs, even though we've got new actors for some of these characters, you know, Rhaenyra, Alicent, Otto, Daemon, Rhaenys, Corlys, these all go back to the episode 1 basically. So Kristen Cole as well. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lots to come, and it sounds like things are going to go up. Like I said, the budget, the amount of action, maybe even the pacing of certain things. So,
It's
I'm anxious, but I'm excited. Obviously,
it's weird because we have heard that, like, from book readers or from people who know the story, like, oh, like now the Dance of the Dragons has started, like season 2 is going to go nuts from here, like you're talking about. But also, like, I've seen people complaining about season 1, like the pacing of it, which I feel like to me, like, this was a 10 out of 10 as far as maybe not like overall score, but like 10
yeah,
episodes, 10 great pieces of television that create this epic first season. Like,
yeah,
I am all in on House of the Dragon. I thought it was fantastic across the board.
yeah,
But like, people, you know, a lot of people had issues with, I don't know if a lot is the right word, but people had issues with
right,
the recasting and all of the time jumps and stuff, but none of that phased me whatsoever. Like, people were
yeah,
saying that, like, some people have said like this season is too slow, but at the same time they're like it's too fast because it's jumping around between everything. Like, saying that
right,
the time jumps didn't allow us to get bonded with the characters. But I mean, to me, I've been bonded with all of the characters, maybe not the actor as much as you have to like adjust to someone new, but like they're portraying the same character, the same stuff has happened to them in world. So that was never an issue for me. But with that being said, whether you thought it was too slow, too fast, just right, it sounds like season 2 and beyond is gonna crank it up even greater speeds, greater pacing, more epic action. But
yeah,
a couple, I know we spent a ton of this time talking about that last little bit, but a couple other things that happened in the episode. um Big time for Sea Snake. Lord Corlys is back on his feet. He after 6 years at war and you know, a glimpse of death, he's back, reunited with his wife, with his house, and they have pledged to support Rhaenyra as queen. So the fleet
Mhm.
is all part of Rhaenyra's army. The
Yeah,
dragons are with her as well. So that's huge for Lord Corlys. We've also got a couple other bannermen that Rhaenyra is trying to rally. You know, obviously the Baratheons are out. They have signed with the Team
seemingly,
Green, but we saw the map lit up, which was great. You know, poor
yeah,
Stannis over there squinting at it. Who knew it lit up? Um, but we saw Winterfell, we saw the Vale, Lord Aaron, which is of course Rhaenyra's mother was Emma Aaron, so that's a family tie there. We're getting hints of heading to Winterfell next season and Craig Stark. So a lot of stuff, a lot of familiar names coming back into the picture to take us into season 2. But let's any thoughts here before we move into I want to hit stock up, stock down as we head into the off season, and then just, you know, we'll wrap up with some overall season 1 reflection, that just thoughts on the season as a whole and what to expect next. But what are we thinking? Anything before we move on?
No, I think yeah, we've hit on a lot of key points. It's just there's a lot of moving parts now, and it's really season 2, I think, is about just showing how this conflict is going to expand, and who, you know, the siding, I think, is going to be a big part of season 2. Is most likely, I'm thinking we're going to get some stuff of them trying to convince or get folks to join their cause. The Starks, I think, is one family that I think a lot of people are expecting the Starks to side with the Blacks, because A, they're the quote unquote good guys, and then B, we know the Starks. What the kind of the thing that they've been talking about, Rhaenyra has been, is that these folks aren't honoring their oaths. They took an oath to be with me, and they are now deciding not to. And the Starks, it's been said, for better or worse, they do not break an oath usually. So I don't think they're going to
Unless
need
you're
that
Rob
much.
Stark.
Exactly. Yeah. Unless you're Rob Stark and you just get really fucking horny. Yeah, there's no doubt, I think, that the Starks are going to be more honorable in this sense. So I'm very curious to see. I mean, when we see Winterfell again, when we hear that music again, probably, oh man, that's going to be a great. I mean, it's going to be like 13 years removed from like season 1 of Game of Thrones, and going back to Winterfell, I think would be very cool. So, and like 5 years removed potentially from the end of the Game of Thrones series. So really exciting about that. Like, I think it's really exciting in general. But yeah, what, stock up, stock down. Who you buying? Who you selling? Who you holding?
Well. Obviously stock is down on Lucerys and Arax. Rest in peace. Hope you sold that while you still could. I think it's Rhaenyra is in a very interesting point here. Obviously, as like I said earlier, the sort of protagonist of this story, the main focus here. Obviously stock down emotionally. We've talked about it, the heavy episode, lots of losses, but this also frees her up. Like, as bad as that may sound, she is now, she's got at least she's on Twitter, she's got the people behind her. Everybody's ready to support her, all of her war crimes that are coming up. People are turning and looking the other way because they think she deserves it after she has free reign.
Yeah.
And I think that look that you were talking about, that closing shot, like, it's the game faces on. I believe the script, I was reading an interview, the script says that Rhaenyra turns and has war in her eyes. So she's ready to go. They have crossed a line. This is no holds barred. Like, we're going in here. So I think stock up in that sense. I mean, obviously I'm still all in on Team Rhaenyra. And I think she's going to be ready to make some power moves. Daemon was already itching to get started to dive into war, and he obviously was, as he was walking to deliver this news, you could see him wiping away tears, trembling, like this is hitting him as hard as it's hitting her. So I think Team Black is going to be coming out swinging next season.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree there. Yeah, it's tough. I mean, there's a lot that is going to be coming, I would say, in the next season, as far as the conflict and people potentially dying, being killed off. I mean, if I'm any of the boys on the green side, I'm probably feeling pretty nervous, because I feel like there's going to be revenge on the mind, just like, Aemond wanted an eye and Alicent wanted an eye for what Lucerys did to Aemond. Hey, Rhaenyra may be wanting to eat a dragon and its rider. And that could be Aegon, that could be Aemond himself. Maybe it's Helena, who may be getting caught in the crossfire. So I think that's going to be interesting. I'm definitely with you on Rhaenyra going up. I think that she's going to be, with the kind of the training wheels off, and with her full anger, it's going to be very enticing, as someone that's to be looked out for. Yeah, and as far as just selling and being kind of down on certain things, I think generally speaking, the Greens should all be very scared about how Rhaenyra and even Daemon are going to react to losing Lucerys. But I think I really do think that the children, especially, I think that there is going to be, and Aemond in particular. I mean, I know he's a badass. I know that, and he seems a little bit less badass after what happened there, but he's a badass. He has experience. He seems like a good warrior. But I mean, I'd be watching my back if I was Aemond, because I feel like that they are going to be coming for him extra hard, knowing that he in particular was the one to start this. So I'm still I'm optimistic about him, and as his potential as like being able to defend himself. I mean, he has a Vagar, and I think Vagar in particular is going to be kind of the big beast that is going to be impossible to take down unless they have a very strategic planned attack or something like that with multiple dragons and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's tough. on that front. And even I would say, as far as people that I'm a little less optimistic on, I would say that you know, I wonder if with this conflict popping off, I wonder, does that make Laris, what's his name, the last name,
The
Strong?
the OnlyFans subscriber slash murderer slash
Yes,
mercenary.
I'm really curious to see, like, I feel like that's one where I feel like he could be more or less interesting, because with this bigger conflict popping off, like, I wonder what value he's gonna have.
It's not like stuff has to be shady or under the table anymore. Like this
Yeah,
is war.
exactly. Like, it's open war. It's the first time in years, or like decades, it seems, that there's been open war in the country in Westeros. So I'm really curious to see how the spy side of things, and like him in particular, what his relationship looks like with Allison, and if he maintains like that same level of value. I mean, he could be someone who, like I said, does go down and isn't as compelling, or doesn't have that same grip on Allison, potentially. So war is coming. I think that's going to change a lot of different people's perspectives and kind of their game plans and strategizing, that sort of thing. So overall, just really intrigued to see how that kind of pans out.
Yeah, I echo the stock down on Team Green as a whole, because they should be playing defense right now. But I'll hit you with another stock up, and that is for the Sea Snake. I was talking about it earlier, but obviously a big return, and he seems to be pretty much back to full strength. I mean, he's walking with a little bit of a limp. He's got a cane, but after the hell that we heard he was going through, and the blood infection and the fever and all that, like that is all after the initial injury, whatever that was. Seems pretty mobile, pretty solid.
Yeah.
And he did not say it in the show. I saw people saying that they wish that he did. But it was a line from the book where he's talking about maybe the gods had spared him for one last fight. And that's this battle that he's pledging to help Rhaenyra fight. So I think he's going to be a major player. Him and Rhaenys, the princess, as well. They're obviously kind of free spirits at this point, with both of their children gone. They still have their grandchildren that they obviously care deeply about, but
Yeah.
I feel like, in their opinion, they don't have anything left to lose. So I feel like that could make them very dangerous players here, as they're diving into battle, flying on dragons, risking it all, which I think makes for a very interesting arc for them. So we'll see what happens. Overall, season 1 in the books, Johnny, you heard me say it earlier. I thought it was 10 for 10, excellent episodes across the board. There was never a moment where I finished an episode and was disappointed, or the only disappointment was that it's over, that I wanted more. But no, I really loved this season. This is immediately shot, once we finished the last episode, shot to the top of my list for the year so far. I'm curious, as someone, this makes me, like, obviously we have who knows how long until the next season, but I'm itching to go rewatch Game of Thrones now, and I know you just did it leading into this with Reagan. Yes. So I'm curious, for someone who is like very closely removed from a rewatch, how would you compare this overall season 1 to the first season of Game of Thrones?
It's so tough. I mean, they are very different, and of course, like, this has the benefit of the added budget right off the bat, and there's more impressive, like, spectacle in this one versus season 1 Game of Thrones, which didn't really have any big battles or action sequences. Yeah, I mean, we're so close. I would say, just like my gut feeling, and maybe this is recency bias, I think maybe the highest highs of season 1 of Game of Thrones are higher than maybe the highest highs here. But I think tit for tat, episode for episode, I may maybe give a slight edge to House of the Dragon, just because they had to do so much, and they did it so well, and they had to span all this time and these characters and children and other grandchildren. And I did have very emotional reactions to a lot of it. I think that's another key thing for me, is I don't really, I mean, in episode 1, like, they had me emotional and like really attached to the characters and their reactions to everything. So I think that's a big testament to how successful the show is in that regard. And then, of course, going through all the way to like Viserys's death and that sort of thing. Whereas Game of Thrones season one, like I don't think I ever had really that same level of attachment. Like I was shocked when Ned was killed, but it wasn't like, oh my God, like I'm so like devastated. Like this, I feel like really devastated me in some ways. And I think also one thing I would say is like the acting in this season has been like outstanding, like across the board. And Game of Thrones also season one has really good actors and really strong performances, but I don't think across the board and in like the same way had the like
Hmm.
the knockout performances from everyone. I think there some of them were they were very much unknown, like very much inexperienced, and we're still like kind of getting their footing. Whereas here, I don't think that was necessarily the case. I think a lot of them were coming in like with their A game, and I think you can definitely feel that and tell that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I obviously have not had that rewatch since probably senior year of college, so it's been a few years at this point. But
Mm.
I'm with you. It could be recency bias. I'll get back to you once I actually do this rewatch. But I'm leaning House of the Dragon right now because I think it obviously benefits, like you said, there's the budget and everything, but also the fact that we were already fans of this world coming in. We knew
Right.
how it works. We know names, we know places, we know what to expect, sort of. So I feel
Yeah.
like that helped it a lot, even though this was like a prequel so far ahead, laying the groundwork, reintroducing things, welcoming in all new elements. So there was still a ton of heavy lifting here, but it benefited from just the familiarity with the world, and that let it get rolling faster versus you're 5 episodes, 6 episodes deep in the first season of Thrones, still trying to figure out names, trying to figure out who's who, what that reference was to, all that, which is like
Yeah.
there was a learning curve there.
Yeah.
So I think I'm leaning House of the Dragon just as an across the board, start to finish strong season. But that's not to take anything away from Thrones, because that's obviously the blueprint. We got to pay tribute to where it started. But as we
Yeah.
look ahead to season two, I think any expectations for season one, there was the anti-Thrones crowd after the final season. They were like, I don't want more Game of Thrones, like you ruined it, blah blah blah. I think any people that were on that train have been won over and are eating their words there. I was always excited for this to come back. I think that it surpassed even the expectations that we had. But as we look ahead to season two, we know they were writing season two while they were in post production of season one, before it even got announced that it was being renewed. Like
Mhm.
had their blueprint, they had this show Bible written in advance. They know they have the benefit of a finished book from George R. R. Martin, so they know where they're working towards in game wise, but they also have it all mapped out as far as the television adaptation goes. So the script has been written. They're filming season two in early 2023. We kind of touched on it with bigger battles, dragons, all that. Anything before we wrap up that you really want to see in this next season here, that you want to leave people with as we head into the off season?
Yeah, I mean, I want them to do their own thing. I don't want to place too much expectations on anything. I feel like that was the best thing I did with this show is I went in and I expected it to be good. I expected it to be even potentially great, and it definitely was. And that was just me keeping an open mind, I think, and it definitely surprised me and exceeded expectations in a lot of ways. I think next season is just I know they're going to introduce more action, more dragon fights, of course, with the Dance of the Dragons really starting. But I hope that they don't lose like the really intimate and like slower character stuff. I think like towards the end of Game of Thrones, it kind of turned into that where it wasn't so much about the characters or the dialogue and that sort of thing. It was more about action and White Walkers and dragons and everything else. And whereas in earlier Game of Thrones seasons 3 and 4, especially like the peak Game of Thrones, I feel like it was the right balance of spectacle and great battles and action and suspense, but also really great character stuff and dialogue in those sorts of scenes. So I hope they
Mm-hmm.
still maintain that and keep like that right balance and give us spectacle, give us epic conflict and that sort of thing, but don't sacrifice like character development or character depth and plot logic and those sorts of things.
Yeah, don't have anybody forget about the Iron Fleet, please.
Yeah.
uh, but no, I'm with you. I want to make sure we stay the same. Obviously, it has potential to just like accelerate at tremendous speeds, but Thrones is at its best. House of the Dragon is at its best when it's people in rooms, in dark, damp
Yeah.
rooms, talking and plotting. And I don't want to lose that as we get into the actual all-out war and battle. Obviously, I want to see plenty of dragons going at it, but still, um,
Hmm.
I want to see. Rhaenyra. I love Rhaenyra already. I'll say it. She's right up there. The way that we rooted for Daenerys until the end, but
Hmm.
I think as we head into war, it'll be very interesting to. I'm curious what people think as a whole. What people want is do we. She's our protagonist. She's our heroine, but she's gonna have to do some bad things. She's gonna have to do some horrible things. Like, do we take this character and really make it like a toss up? Like in my mind right now, I don't see any reason why anybody could be on Team Green. Yet I know there are people out there who are like Team Alicent, Team Green. Do they blur those lines even more and make it more of like a 50-50? Or do you think that it'll stay strictly because like I was saying from the book, like it's written by different maesters, history is presented differently in favor of other people. So do we think that there will be a coming together of it could go either way as to who you're rooting for, or do you foresee yourself staying strictly on Team Black?
You know, after episode 9, I did for the first time like genuinely feel some uh like sympathy for like to some extent like Alicent and even Aegon like to a degree there.
Right, it's still like fuck Otto, but like Alicent, we can get behind
Yeah.
her a little bit.
And like her kids, like I feel like they've been given like a shit hand, even though they are still making their own decisions and making horrible decisions and are horrible people. But I like do sympathize with like their certain positions. So I'm not entirely against the Greens. Otto is really the bad guy. Like he is manipulating and he is doing things, and we haven't really gotten a whole lot with him like by himself to understand like all of his motivations. But I'm definitely still backing the blacks the most, more so than the greens. Like I do, but I do like Amond. I do like
I like
Allison.
Aemond a lot as a character. I despise him, but I think he's a
Yeah.
fascinating character. And I think a lot of people will want to just keep Rhaenyra as like this goody goody hero that we all root for, the main character. But I think it would be more fun and more compelling if she gets a little dirty, if we have to
Mm,
not just root for her blindly, but grapple with some of the things she does. You can still root for her, but like have that conflict. Because
yeah.
that's one of the things that like people like with Aemond and thinking he was just bad, but then seeing that remorse and the guilt immediately afterwards, the question after the incident here, it adds layers to his character, and that's what I want. I want in the words of Benoit Blanc, I want a glass onion. um,
Right.
but the long wait begins. Whether you're going to read the book in the off season, rewatch Thrones, rewatch House of the Dragon, we'll find a way to get through it. And what a season. What a season. But now it's time to shift on over to the big screen, Johnny, for the first part of our Film Fest 919 recap. Going to be talking about a couple movies. But overall, the film festival just wrapped up. It was in Chapel Hill from Wednesday through Sunday. I was over there every day. Saw one movie Wednesday, one movie Thursday, one movie Friday, 4 Saturday, and just one on Sunday. So I was making the most of it. Johnny, you got to come up for the weekend. I saw 7 movies total, plus Black Adam. We snuck him in there. He was not a part of the film festival, unfortunately. I know that prestigious film probably would have won the audience favorite as it changed the hierarchy of power. We'll be talking about that next week. But I saw 7 at the festival. Johnny, you saw 5. And we're just going to spend some time breaking down each of these movies we saw. So it's going to be an open discussion between the two of us because there was a couple that we both saw and then some that we just saw individually. So I will get us started here with the opening night film, which was Devotion. This was a very cool movie that it was a cool opportunity that we had. JD Dillard, the director of the film, was there in person. He received the Spotlight Award from Film Fest 919. So he was there to receive that award, introduce the film, and then they had a question and answer with him and one of the producers who was actually a UNC alumni after the movie. So that was super awesome. to get to hear some insights from him as to how they made the film. But about the movie as a whole, let me pull up a little synopsis here. It's the harrowing true story of two elite US Navy fighter pilots during the Korean War. Their heroic sacrifices would ultimately make them the Navy's most celebrated wingmen. So, let's see. Overall, this is a movie that is about fighter pilots. It has dogfights. It has all of the classic war movie plane elements in it. And it happens to come out in the same year as Top Gun Maverick with a starring man, a leading man who is also in Top Gun Maverick as one of the main characters. So obviously there's going to be some comparisons between the two. However, they are two very different movies, even if they are very similar. One's more of like the action, adrenaline, high-speed Tom Cruise movie. Obviously, this is more of a slower paced, character-driven movie that really examines this character that Jonathan Majors is playing. And it's, I'm trying to think of the right words here to describe it. To me, you've seen war movies before, you've seen movies about discrimination, racism, and I think JD Dillard, one of the things he addressed is that like he knows that, this isn't going to be a as in his words, a slow motion freeze frame high five at the end, like we solved racism. So instead, he's really focusing on the relationship between these two men, between Jonathan Majors' character and Glenn Powell's character. And just like this concept, I know it's obviously called devotion, their devotion to each other, to their country, and the relationship between them and how they can show up for each other every single day and build that trust. Because Jesse Brown, that's Jonathan Majors' character, one of his things is like this trust issue because of the racism that he's endured, not knowing if people are actually have his best interest at heart. But one of the things that I really liked about this movie was that it wasn't like in his words about like the we solved racism kind of thing. It wasn't like, okay, he's a up and coming pilot and he's going to experience racism, and at the end of the day we're all going to come together and he's going to earn his wings. But instead we meet him, he's this fully fleshed out character. He's a experienced pilot. He has the trust of his squadron, and then they're going out on a mission. So it's not like, okay, he's overcoming the odds to get to where he is. He's already where he is, and he's already very good at it. And so then that allows us to just focus on the relationship between these two a lot more. But I think that very strong leading performances here by Glenn Powell and Jonathan Majors, and it really helps to elevate that, and JD Dillard's direction and that nuanced approach helps to elevate this from more than just like a traditional war drama. Some issues that I had with it, the first act was a bit choppy because it was kind of jumping through a lot of different things. This is obviously a true story, and one of the things he was talking about was that like we had to set the stage, but we also had a ton to get to, so they had to like figure out the balance of like, what do you include, what do you not include, before you get to like the main chunk of the story, which is like going out on this mission and everything that happens on it. So once they get through that sort of exposition, the character development to the story that he wanted to tell, it picks up a lot better. The second half is a lot better than the first. But overall, really liked this movie. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, a 78 out of 100. So it's very close to a 4-star. Very emotional. And was just super cool to have JD Dillard in the house to like get some of these insights that I'm referencing here. But I know you have not seen this, you were not able to make it. Any thoughts on the movie, questions, excitement to see it, anything like that, as I turn it over to you?
No, I mean, I've seen the trailer a couple times. I've been shown it before movies this year, and it didn't really stand out to me. And if like we pointed out multiple times now, Top Gun came out this year. It's hard to not draw the comparisons. Top Gun did dogfighting and like the aviation side of things and like making that spectacle on the big screen. They did such a good job with that. And so it's hard to, it's a very different kind of story, obviously. It's based on a true story, as a matter of fact. So it's a different kind of purpose. And it's not to say that there can't be two movies like that. But nothing I saw as far as in the filmmaking and everything else. And I like Glenn Powell. I really love Jonathan Majors. But nothing I saw there like really was gripping me and like made it like I have to see that movie and I'm gonna go see it in theaters. When there are other things, or like at this festival, for example, there are other things that there were to see. So I probably won't see it at least anytime soon or like in theaters. But it seems like a pretty well made movie. Seems like a well acted movie, of course. But yeah, I guess I'm never really piqued my interest too much and seemed not like formulaic or like run of the mill or anything, but it just seemed like very like I knew what I would get out of it by going to see it. And so
it definitely has like some of those war movie discrimination, racism, like tropes, like all of the like what you would expect. But most of it was like the characterization and the performances that helped elevate it above those. Like you can still acknowledge that those are there, but then it can rise above due to some of the other stuff. But like Top Gun obviously has it beat when it comes to the effects and the actual, like, what am I trying to say here? What's the right word here? The aerial fighting, filmography, all of that stuff, the dog fighting. So tough break for it. When JD Dillard signed on to direct this movie, Top Gun Maverick was supposed to come out like 3 weeks later, and then here we are 3 years later, and they're both coming out within a couple months of each other. So very, very tough break, but we can still appreciate them both. But next up, Johnny, tell me about Close.
So Close is a Belgian film. It came out at Cannes Film Festival was its premiere, I believe, earlier this year. And it won an award at Cannes, and it was picked up actually, I believe, even before it premiered or shortly after it premiered, before it won anything. It did win or it didn't win, but it was rather acquired by. It was bought by A24 for distribution and everything. And it's a film by Lucas Don't. I hope A24 has the goods to give it like a decent run and give it like a decent kind of distribution, get it in the awards conversation. Because after premiering a film festival, it had a great reception, of course. It won the Grand Prix, which I believe is the second best award at Cannes, behind the Palm. And so that's obviously a testament to how much it was revered over there. And then it's been doing the rounds at these other smaller kind of festivals. It's by Lucas Don't, I believe. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, but he is a Belgian filmmaker. And I haven't seen any of his other work, not really familiar with his other work at all. I hadn't heard of him prior to this movie. But as far as this movie itself, it's a fairly simple premise. I knew the general idea of it. I knew it was about two boys and kind of their friendship, and then something kind of happens, and we have to see kind of how they deal with it and what the outcome or fallout is from that. And this movie was it was my first movie at the festival. So it was a great kind of way to get me in the zone and get me in that headspace to take on more of these artistic movies. I saw this movie 12 hours after I saw Black Adam, to give you so it was very different, and my experience was just very powerful, I would say. I went in knowing that it would probably be pretty emotional. I did tear up on multiple occasions, and it was getting me pretty good in certain scenes that I won't spoil. But ultimately, just the intimate, very close relationship between these two boys, and I think they're supposed to be 13 or 12, in the movie. So they're just getting they're starting high school basically, and they're just very innocent, and they're very close, obviously, unintended, and just the way that Lucas Don't was able to capture that childhood in innocence, and how you feel about other kids at that age, and also how you feel about the world, and just how you are able to really enjoy like the very simple things and not have to attach any meaning to certain things, whether it's actions or whatnot, and kind of being in like social situations and that sort of thing. And then also like on top of like that very sweet side of the movie, it also captures really well like the heartbreaking kind of realization and like the growth that happens where you kind of get out of that stage of your life and you start to change how you view those relationships and how you act in certain situations like socially. um and so these two boys, they, you know, they have a very, like I said, very close relationship. And when they go back to school and this like new school year starts, it like the way that the other children perceive them and like think of them or like talk to them, like kind of tests their relationship. And one of the boys is kind of feeling it more so than the other, and he starts to kind of change his behavior as a result, and that really like tests their relationship and causes like really the inciting incident like of the movie. Which again I won't spoil, but like it's just very like I just thought the way that that specific relationship, like the two main boys, Eden Dambreen, which again I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, he plays the main, I would say the main child, Leo. And he is like, if nothing else, I would watch this movie. I would watch it again, and I would recommend the movie simply for his performance, because he is so excellent and sensational. And the one way I would describe it, and this is not a knock to children actors that act like children and aren't like trying to do anything different, but like he acts like an adult. Like that's the way like I would describe it. Like the way he performs like certain scenes, and like the way he says his lines, or like will like look at like other characters and that sort of thing. Like it just felt like a very mature, like older, like almost wise kind of performance. And again, this is an actor who I'm like not familiar with at all. I don't see any like other credits of his, but like he just very much grounded the movie, and he really anchors the whole thing, and makes it like worthwhile. And I think a lot of the emotional weight is behind this particular character and this performance. So um he was great. The other kid was also great, Gustav De Whale or De Vale as Remy, the other kid. He was also very good. And then Emily Dequesne, again probably mispronouncing that, as Sophie. She's the mom of the main character's friend, of the second boy, and they have a very close relationship, the three of them, because you know how your best friend's mom will like treat you and like act when you're like kids, especially. It's basically like you have a second mom, and so that was very like tender and sweet and very real. And she was very very good in that performance. And again, they have to hit the highs of like the very sincere, like loving, like happy moments, but also like the darker, like more emotional, like traumatic, I guess you could say, like elements of the. So yeah, really just, it's just like an acting showcase in a lot of ways, but also just more than anything, I would say it's just the sensation of like childhood and like innocence. And like it was like really kind of rushing back to me. Like it's, I think, you know, when they say you unlock like memories or like certain like
Right.
things that you've like forgotten about. It wasn't, I lived in Europe when I was a child, not this age, but much younger. And I visited Belgium. I spent a lot of time in and around Belgium. Um, and so like I was able to like kind of get a reference for like the culture and like just the environment and that sort of thing. But more than anything, just like the feeling of being a kid and those relationships and like the highs and lows and all of that. So I thought it was a great movie. I really liked it. Definitely one of the better ones I've seen so far this year. And just a really kind of special. It doesn't, as far as the story and like the script and the writing and everything, I don't think there was anything that really stood out. It's more so the tone and the feeling of the movie and the performances. So the direction I thought was exceptional. The performance is exceptional. And I think that those were really the highlights. Like the main actor, I would say, is in my top 5 for the year. Like best actor wise, I thought it was directed. Probably the directing is probably in the top 5 of the year for me. The movie itself is probably in the top 10 or so, of like the close to 50 movies I've seen. So yeah, just overall like very high marks.
This is one that I really wanted to see. So I'm glad to hear that you are praising it so highly, because I was not able to make it due to different conflicts. But what do you have a score, star rating on your scale that you want to
Yeah.
stamp on this?
I would say, yeah, it was like a solid like 4 out of 5. Like I thought it was great.
Nice.
What was that, an 80 out of 100 or something, 75
If
out
we're
of
if we're doing the math there, yeah.
I thought, yeah, it was just really, yeah, like I wouldn't say it was like a masterpiece. I wouldn't go like that far, but I thought it was just very, very good and a great piece of a very tender kind of childhood cinema, and like also
Mhm.
like a darker side to it, and also it's like a Belgian film. Like I haven't really seen too many Belgian films. I feel like they kind of get overshadowed by like France and Germany. So it was nice to see another like non-English kind of language like film.
Nice. Well, next up on the schedule, we have Women Talking, which is one that we both saw.
Mm.
And I believe we have differing opinions on this, Johnny. So quick,
Yeah.
quick rundown. In 2010, the women of an isolated religious community grapple with reconciling their reality with their faith. This is based on a novel by Miriam Toews. And this is one that I was not expecting to really like much going into it, just because of like it seemed, it's Women Talking is the name of the movie. It's like the premise is these women trying to decide what to do for their community, just talking, sitting and talking. So that's not necessarily it felt like I expected it to be slow. But I was very impressed with it. I thought that the pacing was great. I gave this a 4 out of 5. And was very, very surprised, very pleased with it. It's a powerful movie, a tough movie, because these women are the premise is that they're being abused by the men in their religious community. It's like this isolated religious community, no electricity, or they have some electricity, but kind of like I believe it's Mennonite is what it is. It's supposed to replicate the book. I learned was actually based on a community in Bolivia. So they adjusted it slightly here. But the premise, like I was saying, is that they're trying to decide what to do, whether they should stay and fight, leave the community, or do nothing. And there's probably, I don't know, 10 women in this room as they're trying to decide, 10, maybe 12. And a ton of back and forth. It's almost like a courtroom drama style. But I thought that it delicately balanced like it could be very easy to just make this feel like an absolutely like gut punch of a movie, just talking about, because it's based around abuse. It's very bleak. So it could lean very far in that direction, but I feel like it balanced the subject matter that it's actually covering with a sense of empowerment, hopefulness, focusing on the agency of these women and their decision making, rather than just the pain that they have gone through. So it was actually surprisingly funny. I did had like some very lighthearted moments as the women are obviously going through hell, but they don't lose their faith in their religion and each other, supporting each other, laughing, learning to still have a good time. But to me, I thought there was a lot of powerful performances here. You've got a very strong ensemble cast, but 3 main standouts: Jessie Buckley, Rooney Mara, and Claire Foy are kind of leading the charge here with the women, the 3 most vocal people in the arguments. Ben Whishaw as well was pretty much the one man in this movie who's there to take the minutes, to take notes on this meeting. He was fantastic as well. So I gave this, like I said, 4 out of 5. This was I think I had it at about an 84. So I really was very surprised by this, really liked it. So Johnny, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely wasn't as high on it as you are. Unfortunately, which is interesting because it was like in the last month or so, I was kind of paring down my list and like my most anticipated movies for the rest of the year. And this wasn't like in the top like 10 necessarily, but it was definitely up there. Just because I had heard such good things about it, and the reactions and reviews have been so positive. And also the cast, like I was really looking forward to seeing another great performance from Rooney Mara, Jessie Buckley, like Claire Foy, all actors that I really like and respect. And I thought that it is certainly an acting like showcase in a lot of ways. Like it's very
Mhm.
much reliant on these performances to make you believe and make you feel kind of the horror and the emotion behind everything that's going on. I was glad, and I think you kind of alluded and like touched on this a bit, but there are moments of levity throughout the movie. Like there is definitely a like you can sense the relation, like the closeness of the relationships and the kinship through how they joke with one another or like tease one another and that sort of thing. And like just the way they'll talk to each other and kind of like almost a um it's kind of like over the top, but it's like just meant almost like as a joke, like you would with any like of your friends. So I liked that part of it. That was like kind of surprising. I think for me, like, well, there's a couple things. The biggest thing for me was that it just didn't ever feel like, and it's interesting because right now I think this is like pretty much pinned as like the movie that is the one to beat for best adapted screenplay, like all the like going all the way to the Oscars because that category is looking so light and like not very competitive this year. Um, and I feel like this one is like really the one to be. And I don't know. I'm not sure. I have no familiarity with the book whatsoever. And so I can't speak to that at all. But I'm just curious, like how it was adapted, like how much of this dialogue and like the story is like very much like perfectly like repeating what is in the book and how much is like created. Because for me, like it just felt like very, I don't know, it felt like very strangely repetitive in like a lot of ways to me. Which I get that's kind of the point in some regard because it is like they're kind of gridlocked in their own like feelings and opinions, and then they have to kind of like try and change the other people's feelings and the other women in the film. But it was just a lot of like it seemed like they were saying like almost like line for line like the same thing like over and over again, saying like, well, we should leave or we should stay and fight. And like that's really the debate. Like that's what they're trying to decide is whether to leave or stay and try to change.
Mhm.
They've chosen that, you know, doing nothing is not an option, which makes for like an interesting kind of like jumping off point. And even when they were voting like earlier in the movie about what they were going to do, what plan of action to take, and they decided that it was basically a tie, and they needed to have a council about it. I thought that was a really intriguing kind of start. So um, I don't know. It just felt like it was a lot of like Claire Foy has her feelings, like she really wants to fight, like she wants to get revenge. Essentially, she comes kind of from like a more vengeful place. Jesse Buckley's character is more like, well, I don't even know, like, is it a good idea to leave? Like, I don't really see if that's like the best option necessarily. But she doesn't. She also isn't like certain about like staying and doing nothing or staying and fighting.
And then Rooney Mara, who's like the of like the women, the main women, she's I guess probably the kind of the third big one. In like in the awards conversation, at least, she is very much like she's very calm, like she doesn't really have any outbursts in the movie. I'm not even sure if she really cries in the movie. She's pregnant as a result of like these assaults, and so she has achieved like almost like this zen feeling about the fact that she has a child and like she needs to be responsible for it and like needs to take care of it, which is of course like very noble, and I think was like a nice counterbalance to how angry and very like explosive like some of the monologues were from the other characters. But for me, it never felt like, and even by the end of like their whole council, like where they're trying to decide what to do, I
Mhm.
never really felt like any of them like changed their minds necessarily. Like none of them like it wasn't like, okay, yeah, we all agree that we're gonna go do this now. It was just kind of like, okay, everyone said their piece, and then they were like, okay, well, I guess we're leaving. And then like that's what they decided to do. And so it wasn't like, I don't know, I just felt like very like, okay, yeah, like I guess like I saw that. Like I feel like that was like the obvious kind of outcome. But when it happened, I was just like, okay, I wasn't necessarily as invested as like I wished I had been. And like it was interesting because I was just saying about Close. And you know this, like I'm a pretty emotional person, especially when it comes to like watching like movies and shows. Like if I'm moved by something very easily, it doesn't matter what it is, if it's happy, light, dark, etc. Like I'll tear up or cry or whatever. In this movie, which has such dark subject matter and very upsetting, disturbing imagery and storytelling, and like hopeful, like great, like positive things too. Like I didn't like tear up, I didn't cry, like I didn't like for whatever reason, I just couldn't really find myself like falling into the story or like into the characters like as much as I like wish I had. Which was like a bit of a disappointment just because like I felt like the like on paper this was should have been that for me. But
Right.
wasn't. So, and like the other main thing I guess I would complain about with this, like to be the more critical of the two in this convo is like movie making wise, like Sarah Polley, I haven't seen any of her other films. She's a very acclaimed director, like very like highly regarded in a lot of ways. And I'm sure she'll probably be in the best director conversation. This will be nominated for best picture, etc. She's probably gonna win an Oscar. Um, to me, I felt like the movie itself takes place mostly in that one room or like in this one conversation of this meeting with this group of women. And like you do get instances of outside of that barn, and you get to see the surrounding community and different like imagery and that sort of thing. But for me, like visually and just like standard, and movies don't have to be like big and like a lot of landscape shots and like very epic, like tricky editing and that sort of thing. Like a movie I've seen this compared to a lot is like in some instances like 12 Angry Men, because that movie takes place in one room basically, and it's just 12 men sitting around talking, and it's one of the most like beautifully like stunningly shot and edited like movies of all time. And in this I felt like, and I'm not going to hold it to that standard obviously, but I just never felt like it really struck me like with its editing decisions or like some of its like camera movements or like any of the shot like choices or compositions. Like nothing ever like really struck me so much. And I don't know if this would contributed to the fact or not, but this movie's color grading, like
I was gonna ask that's the I remember you commented on it during the trailer
Yeah.
online, and I was curious. I don't think we knew at that point whether that was like just the trailer look or if that was the real
Yeah.
movie look, but it's very desaturated, very like bluish tinted, very
Yeah.
cold. And it was like for me it wasn't like a deal breaker, but it was not ideal. I mean, I understand like the reasoning behind it, or at least my interpretation is like that like these women have like the color is gone from their world, like they've been abused, like they've been beaten down, they've been living this way for so long that like this is how they see the world now, like that there is not like the bright hopeful world that you would normally see in full color. That was my reading of it. I don't know if that's surface level or accurate or whatnot, but or if you felt the same way. But
Yeah.
it just wasn't. I feel like I would have liked it better if it was just regular color.
Yeah, like I don't know. I feel like there's definitely some sort of meaning, or like obviously like it was a choice, and whether you liked it or not is one thing. And no coloring of a movie could ever like if the movie's good, it's good. Like the color is just one element of it. I mean, I still thought this movie was good. I just thought it could have been great, and I don't think it was. I thought it was just a very odd choice to desaturate it so much, but not just like decide to go black and white or something like that. You know what I mean? Um,
Mm-hmm.
like the movie is very much like, I don't want to say it's like a clear delineation between good and evil or like women versus men or something like that. It's not quite that, but it's very much like these women are innocent and they haven't done anything wrong, and these men are doing horrible things to them and are complicit if they aren't. And I just didn't like, I felt like you could done like black and white, like at least on a very basic like symbolic level would have made sense in that regard almost. And black and white always is like the Academy, for example, is like a sucker for black and white movies, and it always looks nice. Like if it's done well, it looks very crisp and very clean and can be very striking. This just looked like wet cement. Like it did not look good. And even one thing that struck my head while I was watching the movie, thinking about it, was, they start out from this place of like despair, and they have to make a huge decision that's going to impact the rest of their lives and their entire community. And so they start from this point of like being like very downtrodden, feeling powerless, and then throughout the movie they have to come to this point where they feel like they're taking their power back, and they're having agency, and they're basically declaring their independence. And then at the end of the movie they do leave, and like it's like a whole new day, like it's literally like morning and they're leaving. um and I thought, how cool, like in a way, I mean, maybe it would have been on the nose or like over the top, but like in a way, wouldn't it have been cool to see like it's very dark and like very desaturated when the movie starts, and then like almost like scene to scene or like throughout the movie as it gets closer and closer to then, like the color like kind of creeps into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
By the end, like when they're leaving, the sun is like beaming down and they're all in their like dresses and they're like packing up and leaving, like for the color to be like fully like formed and like almost like radiating, like saturated, in like a very like
like elegant or kind of like poetic sort of way. I thought that would have been like just like throwing an idea out there is like something would have been maybe more inviting from like a visual standpoint, but I just don't understand I can't like understand it. And again, it's not the biggest deal in the world. I'm not gonna like belabor it too much, but like it's just very weird and I didn't like it. And that's just like one small part of like my overall like not negative feelings, but just like criticisms or like critiques I have about the movie, which again, I did like. I laughed. I was hit in the heart and the stomach by a lot of the things I saw and heard. And I thought the cast overall was still very good. But it didn't quite reach the level that I was hoping for, like had heard it could reach.
I understand that. I agree with you on the coloring. One question, not question, one I guess last point that I want to touch on before we move on. One thing about this movie is that it feels timeless. In the sense that like they're in this isolated community, you don't really know when it is, but also like this like unfortunately like women have experienced this for centuries of like abuse under the power of men. But I didn't know a ton about this going in. I don't know if it's revealed in a trailer or if you just know from the book or what, but like for me, a lot of this, like early on, it was like, okay, like the way that they act and dress and have horses and buggies in their house and everything, like it could be like, you know, like 1600s almost, like very like colonial times almost. And then like you get bits and pieces of information like, okay, maybe it's like 1800s, like post Civil War, like, but then it's like, okay, wait, we see like refrigerator and stove. Okay, like now we're moving into like the 1900s, and then it's like, okay, there's like Tupperware, like there's like until you get to the point where there is that scene where the census taker is driving around saying that it's he's you have to come out and to be counted for the 2010 census. And then it's like, oh my god, like this is where we are, like this is, I don't know if you knew that about this movie, but like I was spending a lot of the time trying to figure out when it was
Yeah.
until that point.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's worth mentioning. I did not know. I did not know the time setting of the movie. But I thought that was I don't know if that was how much like obviously there was a lot of thought and intent put into it, but I'm just wondering like what the thought process was because it is interesting how it does feel timeless and you're not sure when it takes place. And I was like, this could be the 80s, the 70s, or it could be like now, you know what I mean? And so when they finally did say 2010, I was like, oh, okay, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. That they chose that particular timing. Like, I wonder if there's any significance to that specifically, or what the rationale was. But yeah, I thought that was cool and a kind of like not really like a plot twist or like a shocking reveal or something.
Right.
Oh, this is like, it feels like it could be any time in the last couple hundred years, but it isn't like now, essentially. Like it's recent. And just a reminder that like these things still go on and you don't have to be living in a religious colony to experience it or be like a subject to those kind of abuses and like horrible things. But just modern society, of course, is still rampant. So I thought that was a nice touch in some ways, and you can read it kind of a couple of ways.
Well, moving on to our final movie of this part one recap from Film Fest 919. Last up is one that I saw myself. Johnny was not able to see, but it is an A24 movie. It's called The Inspection. It comes out November 18th, so relatively soon. But it's a drama based on a true story, about a young gay black man who is rejected by his mother, kicked out of the house, and with little chance for a future, he decides to join the Marines, doing whatever it takes to find meaning in his life. Not necessarily because he's like passionate about serving his country, but he has a line where he says that like, if I die, like I'm probably gonna die anyway, living on the streets. If I die in this uniform, to somebody, I'm a hero. So trying to find like some sort of fulfillment, purpose, something to be proud of. But once he gets to the Marine boot camp, this is back in, I want to say like the early 2000s. It's like don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. But he is immediately, not immediately, like within his first little bit there, he's like outed as being gay and faces a ton of discrimination from his superiors, from the people in his training crew. Just makes his life a whole lot harder here. And he's trying to overcome and make it through the training to come out the other side as a Marine. But pretty solid cast here. Jeremy Pope plays Ellis French. That's the main guy. Raul Castillo is in here. McCall Lombardi, Aaron Dominguez, Gabrielle Union, Bokeem Woodbine. So solid little cast here. But this is one that I was pretty excited for coming in. Oh, and I have to shout out Jake's friend in the cast as well. Iman Esfandi, who is announced to be taking over the role of Ezra Bridger in live action Star Wars. But shout out to friend of the pod's friend.
Icon.
But I was really excited for this one heading in. It seemed like it would be a, right up my alley, like an emotional, pull up the heartstrings kind of story. And it was good. I liked this movie, but I think after having just seen Devotion and hearing what JD Dillard was saying, what I was mentioning earlier about the the stereotypical beats, the slow motion high five, we solved racism. That's sort of what this was, but for like homophobia and discrimination. Very familiar plot points. The overall story was pretty standard, checking all of those boxes. But didn't really stand out as far as like making it a new story or taking a different approach to it. Like I was saying about Devotion earlier, about like we meet him, he has to overcome all these adversities, and then he comes out the other side and is good. Like that's sort of what this was, whereas Devotion was not. But with all that being said, Jeremy Pope is fantastic in this leading role. One of the best performances that I've seen. He really gives it his all and elevates this from being, even though it is standard fanfare, he takes this to the next level, and makes it, this would be like a 2.5, I would say. But because of him and his performance, it bumped it up to a 3 for me. Gave it a 60 out of 100. But I thought it was solid. I liked it. Wasn't anything revolutionary or particularly game changing, but still a good movie here. Johnny, any plans to see this one when it hits theaters, or thoughts about the movie?
Yeah, this is one I was originally trying to see if I could squeeze it into my schedule. Because I did think it looked interesting. Like the performance, I'd heard very good things about Jeremy Pope. I think you said is the main actor.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard very good things out of TIFF and other festivals. So I'd be curious to see if he pops up at all during the award season. And of course, Iman, cool to see him in a feature of this level. Gabrielle Union, of course, also looked very, very good. And Bokeem Woodbine, I also quite like him. And was interested to see how he plays more of like the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know if, again, just with the schedule, like so many other movies, I was like, I'm not going to be able to fit it. And I don't know if I'll necessarily catch it in theaters, at least, in the near future. But yeah, I'm glad it sounds like you probably would have had I imagine my response would be fairly similar to yours. Probably would like it and enjoy it, and like the acting especially, but maybe not anything, like you said, recreating the wheel or anything like that as far as these kinds of stories are concerned.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. But like I said, it was good enough. Nothing crazy, but really solid performance. I have to go back. I know you kind of track it as the year goes on of like your favorite performances and like penciling in Oscar nominations and whatnot. I don't do that, so I'd have to go back and look when it comes time for NCFCA nominations. But just off the top of my head, I would say that he'll probably be in consideration for me, at least, as far as who I'm nominating, who I'm suggesting for best actor. But like I said, 3 out of 5 for me, 60 out of 100. Pretty solid stuff. But that's it for part 1 of our Film Fest 919 coverage. We've still got a lot left to go that'll be coming at you soon. We still got to talk about The Banshees of Inisherin, Saint Omer, Bardo, She Said, White Noise, and Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. So a lot of good stuff coming your way. But for now, thank you for tuning in to our House of the Dragon recap, to our Film Fest 919 coverage. We appreciate it and would not be able to do it without you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for tuning in and keeping up with us over here inside the film room. To keep up even more, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube. You can catch all of our episodes on YouTube as well. And those social media accounts can be found at Inside Film Room.
And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Amazon, iHeart, anywhere you can get a podcast. We are there. And be sure to come back for part 2 of our Film Fest 919 coverage. We'll see you then.